Hello there everyone, welcome to Nightmare Narratives. I am your storyteller and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Tommy Hartwell, and I need to tell you what happened at WZAP-FM during the solar storm of 1974. I know how crazy this sounds, but I have to get it down on paper before I forget what it means to be human. I was 28 then, working the graveyard shift at our little radio station up on Copper Mountain in West Virginia. WZAP wasn't much to look at, just a concrete block building with a tall antenna, sitting on a plateau where the wind never stopped howling. The nearest town was 40 miles down a winding mountain road that turned to mud when it rained and ice when it snowed. I took the job because I wanted to be alone. My girlfriend Sarah had died in a car crash 6 months earlier, and I couldn't stand being around people anymore. Everyone kept telling me it would get better. That time heals all wounds, but their voices just sounded like noise. The only thing that made sense was talking to strangers through the radio. Waves people I'd never have to see or explain myself to. The overnight shift was perfect for me. From midnight to 6 a.m., I'd play music for insomniacs, truck drivers, and night shift workers. Sometimes people would call in just to talk. There was something about the darkness that made folks honest, made them share things they'd never say in daylight. I became their invisible friend, their voice in the dark. The station had been there since 1952, built by some rich guy who wanted to bring music to the mountain communities. By the time I got there, it was barely hanging on. Just me, the daytime DJ Pete Morrison, and our engineer Buck, who kept the ancient equipment running with spit and prayer. That October, the newspapers started talking about solar storms. Scientists said the sun was having fits, throwing out magnetic storms that could mess with radio signals and power grids. I didn't pay much attention at first. We got interference all the time up on the mountain, atmospheric bouncing, CB radio chatter, sometimes even air traffic control from airports hundreds of miles away. But on October 15th, things started getting weird. I was playing a late set of folk music when I noticed something strange between songs. During the quiet moments when one record ended and before the next began, I could hear faint voices in the background, static. At first, I thought it was just bleeding from another station, but the voices didn't sound like any language I recognized. I checked all our equipment. Everything looked normal. The voices were so quiet I had to strain to hear them, like whispers coming from very far away. They sounded urgent, almost desperate, but I couldn't make out any words. That's when the first real storm hit. Not a weather storm, a magnetic one, invisible but powerful enough to make our equipment go haywire. The lights flickered, and our main transmitter started humming in a way I'd never heard before. Buck had warned me about solar storms, said they could make radio waves bounce around like ping-pong balls, picking up signals from thousands of miles away. But as I listened to those whispered voices growing stronger in the static, I started to wonder if they were coming from much farther than that. The voices became clearer over the next 3 nights. During the quiet moments between songs, I'd lean close to the speakers and listen. They weren't speaking English or Spanish or any language I could identify. I tried German, French, even looked up some Russian phrases in an old dictionary we had lying around. Nothing matched. What bothered me most was the tone. These weren't casual conversations or radio shows. Every voice sounded terrified, desperate, like people screaming into their microphones as their world ended. On October 18th, I decided to record some of the transmissions. I set up our old Realtrol tape recorder and left it running during my shift. The next morning, I played back the tape for Buck when he came in to check the equipment. Atmospheric. Skip, he said, adjusting his thick glasses. Solar storms bouncing signals all over the place. Could be picking up radio from Russia, China, anywhere really. But Buck looked worried. He'd been working radio for 30 years, and I could tell this wasn't normal atmospheric, Skip. Tom, he said quietly, how many different voices you're hearing? I thought about it. Maybe 20, 30 different speakers, all on different frequencies. Buck nodded slowly. That's too many. Atmospheric, Skip, usually gives you one clear signal, maybe 2. And these voices, he played back a section of tape. Listen to that background noise. I listened. Behind the voices was a strange humming sound, almost like singing, but wrong somehow. It made my teeth ache. Never heard anything like that, Buck admitted. Could be equipment failure, but ... He trailed off, looking at our transmitter readings. Tom, what frequency are these voices coming in on? I showed him my notes. I'd been tracking the signals, trying to find a pattern. Buck went pale. These frequencies don't exist. What do you mean? I mean the radio spectrum only goes up 200-300 gigahertz. You're picking up signals from frequencies that are mathematically impossible. He tapped the readings with a shaking finger. Either our equipment is completely broken, or ... He didn't finish the sentence. That night, I tried something different. Instead of just listening, I started talking back to the voices. During a quiet moment between records, I leaned into the microphone and said, "Hello, can anyone understand me?" The response was immediate. Every voice stopped talking at once. For about 10 seconds, there was complete silence except for that strange humming in the background. Then one voice came through clearly, speaking in what sounded like English, but with an accent I couldn't place. "Is ... Is someone there? Please, we don't have much time. The dark tide is coming." My hands started shaking. "Who is this? Where are you calling from?" The voice broke up for a moment, then came back stronger. "My name is F. Colin. I think your word is astronomer. I am broadcasting from the third planet of the star you call Vega, but that cannot be right. Vega is 25 light years from your world. This transmission should take 25 years to reach you." I felt something cold crawl up my spine. "That's impossible." "Yes," the voice agreed sadly, "but so is what's happening to us. The dark tide has reached our system. Our sun is growing cold, not dying, being drained. Something is feeding on the light itself." Behind Zeph Collins' voice, I could hear other voices, all speaking different languages but with the same desperate tone. In the background, that strange humming was getting louder. "What's the dark tide?" I asked. "It's hard to explain in your language. Not a thing, but an absence. Hunger given form. It moves between the stars, consuming everything that lives and grows and thinks. We have been watching it approach for generations. Now it is here." The transmission started breaking up. I could hear Zeph Colin calling out, but the words were getting lost in static. Just before the signal died completely, I heard him say, "Earth ... your world is next. In perhaps 50 of your years we tried to warn the others, but no one believed. No one ever believes until it's too late." Then silence. I sat in the dark radio booth, staring at equipment that shouldn't be able to pick up signals from other star systems, listening to warnings from someone who claimed to be on a planet 25 light-years away. And the worst part was, I was starting to believe him. Over the next week, the transmissions came every night, getting stronger and clearer. It wasn't just Zeph Colin anymore. I was picking up voices from dozens of different worlds, all facing the same thing they called the dark tide. There was Vera 9, a crystalline being from a planet orbiting Rigel, who sang mathematical equations that somehow translated into warnings about the approaching danger. Her world had already fallen. She was broadcasting from an escape pod drifting in space, watching her star grow dim. There was something called the Collective from Betelgeuse, thousands of connected minds speaking as one voice, describing how the dark tide didn't just destroy it, corrupted, turning life itself into emptiness, making planets and stars forget how to shine. And there was Korath, from a world they called the First City, who claimed his civilization had been fighting the dark tide for millions of years, watching it slowly consume galaxy after galaxy. "Your mathematics are primitive," Korath told me during one transmission. "But perhaps you can understand this. Imagine entropy with intention. Imagine the force that makes things fall apart, becoming conscious, becoming hungry. That is what hunts us all." I started staying at the station during the day, sleeping on the old couch in the break room. I told Pete and Buck I was working on a special project, but the truth was I couldn't leave. Every night brought new voices, new warnings, new pieces of a cosmic puzzle that was starting to show me how small and doomed we all were. The voices were coming from different time periods too. Some, like Zeph Colin, were dying right now. Others had died millions of years ago, their final transmissions somehow echoing through space and time. A few claimed to be broadcasting from Earth's future, describing the day the dark tide would finally arrive here. "Tommy Hartwell," said a voice that sounded exactly like mine. but older and more broken. If you're hearing this, it means the loop is still intact. I am you, broadcasting from the year 2024, 50 years from your time. The dark tide came early. I nearly fell out of my chair. That's not possible. Nothing about this is possible, my future self replied. But that won't stop it from happening. Listen carefully. You're not just receiving these transmissions randomly. You're part of something bigger. Every civilization that faces the dark tide produces someone like you as a witness, a recorder, a voice that connects the dying to those who will die next. The transmission was breaking up, but I could still hear my own voice, older and hollow with despair. We tried to warn people. They wouldn't listen. They never listen. But maybe you can do what I couldn't. Maybe you can. Static swallowed. The rest. That night, I started having dreams. Not normal dreams, visions of dying worlds, of stars going dark one by one across the galaxy. I saw the dark tide itself, not a creature or a force, but a spreading wrongness that made existence forget how to exist. In my dreams, I floated through space and watched entire solar systems simply ... stop. Planets didn't explode or get consumed. They just became less real, like someone was slowly erasing them from the universe. I woke up screaming. Buck found me the next morning, curled up on the floor of the broadcast booth, surrounded by pages of notes I didn't remember writing. The notes were covered in equations and star charts, drawn in a dozen different handwriting styles that weren't mine. Tom, Buck said gently, "You need to go home, get some rest." I showed him the recordings from the night before, voices from other worlds, speaking in languages that shouldn't exist, describing the end of everything. Buck listened for almost an hour, his face growing paler with each new voice. Finally, he turned off the tape player and sat down heavily. "I've been doing some research," he said quietly. "Those coordinates you've been writing down, I checked them against astronomical surveys. They match empty space between star systems, places where there should be nothing but vacuum. So the voices are lying." "No," Buck said. "I think they're telling the truth. I think there used to be something there." On October 30th, everything changed. The solar storm reached its peak that night, and our equipment went completely crazy. Every radio in the station was picking up the alien transmissions, even ones that weren't turned on. The voices were so clear now they sounded like they were in the room with us. Buck had stayed to help me monitor the situation. We both heard when the voices suddenly stopped their individual broadcasts and began speaking in unison, hundreds of different beings from across the galaxy, all saying the same thing in perfect English. "It has found you." The temperature in the broadcast booth dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Our breath came out in clouds, and frost started forming on the equipment. But the strangest thing was the silence outside. The wind that never stopped howling on Copper Mountain had gone completely still. "Tommy," Buck whispered, pointing at our transmission equipment. "Look at this." Our radio wasn't just receiving signals anymore. It was broadcasting on every frequency, simultaneously sending our voices out into space. The power readings were impossible. We were transmitting with more wattage than a major city radio station, using equipment that should barely reach the next county. That's when I understood what was happening to me, what had happened to all the other voices I'd been hearing. "We're not random listeners," I said. "We're the chosen ones. Every world that faces the dark tide produces someone like USM who has to witness it, record it, pass the warning on to the next civilization." The voices confirmed it, speaking to me directly now. "Zeph Collin, you begin to understand. Tommy Hartwell, we are the final witnesses, the last voices before the silence. Veronine, each world produces one who must carry the burden of knowing. The universe requires someone to remember what was lost, my future self, and someone to warn what comes next, even though the warning is always ignored." I looked at Buck, who was staring at me with growing horror. "You're changing," he said. "Your eyes ... they look different, like you're seeing things that aren't there." He was right. I could see more now, not just the dying worlds the voices described, but the connections between them. Lines of communication stretching across space and time, linking every civilization that had ever faced the dark tide. We were all part of a vast network of final witnesses, cosmic radio operators, broadcasting warnings into the void, and I could see the dark tide itself, moving through space like a slow wave of uncreation. It would reach Earth in 50 years, just like the voices said. Nothing could stop it. Nothing ever had. "Buck," I said, my voice sounding strange even to myself. "You need to leave. Now. I'm not leaving you here alone. You don't understand. I'm not alone anymore. I'm connected to all of them, every voice that ever broadcast a final warning, and soon, I'll be broadcasting too." The equipment around us started changing, displaying readings that shouldn't be possible, broadcasting on frequencies that didn't exist. The station itself was becoming something more than a radio transmitter. It was becoming a node in the cosmic network of final witnesses. Buck grabbed my arm. "Tom, fight this. Whatever's happening to you, you can fight it." I looked at him with eyes that could now see across space and time, and I smiled sadly. "I don't want to fight it, Buck. Someone has to do this job. Someone has to listen to the universe die and pass the warning on. If I don't, who will?" They found the station empty. The next morning, after the solar storm finally passed, Buck had made it halfway down the mountain before the roads became impassable. And when the rescue crews reached him, he could only tell them that Tommy Hartwell had vanished during the night. The equipment was still running, but it wasn't broadcasting anything on normal frequencies. The investigators said it looked like I'd just walked away, leaving everything turned on. They never found my body, but if you know how to listen, if you tune your radio to the frequencies that don't officially exist, during the quiet hours when the world sleeps, you can still hear me. I'm still up there on Copper Mountain, but I'm also everywhere the dark tide has touched. I'm connected to every final witness across the galaxy, part of a network of voices that span space and time. We broadcast warnings that no one believes, comfort to civilizations facing their end, and witness to the universe's long, slow death. Sometimes I talk to the truckers and insomniacs who tune in by accident. I play them music and listen to their troubles, just like I used to. They don't know they're talking to someone who's been dead for 50 years. Someone who's seen the end of everything and chosen to stay and help others face it too. Because that's what we do. We final witnesses. We make the dying a little less alone. Buck lived to be 93. Sometimes, in his final years, he would drive up the mountain and sit in his car near the old station. He'd tune his radio to the emergency frequencies and listen. He never heard my voice, but he said the music was always good. The dark tide is still coming. 50 years from 1974, just like they warned. I've seen it happen. I am there when it happens, broadcasting Earth's final messages to whoever comes next in the cosmic chain of witnesses. But that's a long time from now. Plenty of time for people to live and love and make music in the darkness. Plenty of time for voices to comfort each other across the void. And when Earth's time comes, when our sun starts growing cold and our world begins to forget how to exist, I'll be there, broadcasting warnings and comfort to the next civilization in line, making sure they know they're not alone as they face the impossible darkness. Until then, I'll keep playing music for the night shift workers and the insomniacs and anyone else who needs a friendly voice in the dark, because that's what radio is really for, connecting people across impossible distances, making sure no one has to face the silence alone. My name is Tommy Hartwell, and this is WZAP-FM, broadcasting from everywhere and nowhere, for as long as the universe remembers how to listen. And now, here's a song for everyone out there in the dark. My name is Sarah Whitmore, and I take pictures for a living. Not the fancy kind you see in magazines, mostly weddings, family portraits, the occasional real estate shoot. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills and lets me travel. I've always been good at seeing things others miss, catching those moments between the posed smiles when people's real faces show through. I hadn't been home to Vermont in 3 years when Grandma Rose died. The funeral was small, just me, really. The Whitmores had never been a big family, and now I was the last one left, standing in that old cemetery behind our family estate. Watching them lower her casket into the ground, I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The house looked exactly the same as I remembered from childhood visits. Whitmore Manor, built in the 1820s. All dark wood and tall windows that never seemed to let in enough light. The paint was peeling worse now, and some of the shutters hung crooked, but it still had that imposing presence that had scared me as a kid. Inside, everything smelled like old wood and something else I couldn't quite place. Something sweet and medicinal, like a hospital. Grandma Rose had lived alone here for the past 20 years, ever since Grandpa died. I'd always wondered how she managed in such a big place by herself. The lawyer had been clear about the inheritance. Everything was mine now, the house, the land, even some money I hadn't expected. But there were conditions, strange ones. I had to live in the house for at least 1 full week before I could sell it or make any major changes, and I had to go through all of Grandma's personal things myself. No outside help allowed. I spent the first day just walking through the rooms, taking pictures out of habit. The house had good bones, as they say. High ceilings, beautiful old hardwood floors, fireplaces in almost every room. It would sell well, probably to some city family looking for a weekend retreat. I just needed to get through this week, clean out the personal stuff, and then I could get back to my real life. But something felt wrong from the start. Little things at first. Doors I was sure I'd closed would be open when I came back. The temperature seemed to change randomly. One room would be freezing while the next was stuffy and warm. And there were sounds at night. Creaking, sure, but also what sounded like footsteps in the hallway outside my room. Old houses make noise, I told myself. Grandma had been 93 when she died. Maybe her hearing had been going and she hadn't noticed these things. Maybe I was just being silly, letting my imagination run wild because I was alone in a big, empty house. On the second day, I found the locked room. It was on the 3rd floor, at the end of a hallway I didn't remember from my childhood visits. The door was painted the same dark green as all the others, but this one had 2 locks on it, a regular doorknob lock and a deadbolt above it. Both were old brass, polished smooth from years of use. I'd found a ring of keys in Grandma's bedroom, hanging on a little hook inside her jewelry box. Most of them were clearly for outside doors, but a few smaller ones looked like they might fit interior locks. It took me 10 minutes of trying different combinations before I found the right ones. The door opened with a soft click and a rush of cold air that made me shiver. The room beyond was dark, heavy curtains blocking out the afternoon sun. I felt along the wall for a light switch and found one of those old push-button types. When I pressed it, a single bulb in the center of the ceiling flickered on. What I saw made my stomach drop. The room was set up like some kind of medical laboratory. There was a metal table in the center, the kind you see in hospitals, with leather straps hanging from the sides. Cabinets lined the walls, filled with glass jars and bottles I couldn't identify. And there were tools, surgical tools, I realized, laid out on a smaller table like someone had just been using them. But the strangest thing was the photographs. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, covering every inch of the walls. They were all family photos, but not normal ones. These showed people I didn't recognize, but they all had something wrong with them. Extra fingers, eyes that were the wrong color, faces that seemed stretched or distorted somehow. I moved closer to get a better look, and felt my breath catch. At the bottom of each photo was a name and a date, written in careful script. Margaret Whitmore, 1847. James Whitmore, 1923. Elizabeth Whitmore, 1956. These were my family. Generations of Whitmores I'd never heard of, all looking wrong somehow. And as I looked more carefully, I started to see patterns. The same unusual eye color appearing in different generations. The same distinctive jawline. The same extra finger on the left hand. But it was impossible. These photos spanned more than a century, but some of the people looked exactly the same across decades, as if they hadn't aged at all. I grabbed my camera and started taking pictures of everything. The room, the tools, the photographs on the walls. I needed to document this before I figured out what it all meant. As I worked, I noticed something else. There was another door at the far end of the room, partially hidden behind one of the cabinets. This door wasn't locked, but it was heavy, like it was made of metal instead of wood. When I pulled it open, cold air rushed out, and I could smell something that made my eyes water. The smell of preservatives, like what they use in biology labs. The room beyond was even stranger than the first one. It was much larger, with a high ceiling that disappeared into darkness above the reach of my phone's flashlight. Along the walls were what looked like large glass containers, each one filled with some kind of clear liquid, and floating in those containers were... I couldn't process it at first. My brain just refused to accept what I was seeing. Body parts, human body parts, perfectly preserved, floating in those glass jars like specimens in a museum. Arms, legs, organs I couldn't identify. All of them looked fresh, as if they'd been placed there yesterday. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that some of them were moving. I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I dropped my camera and ran out of that room. slamming the door behind me. I made it halfway down the stairs before my legs gave out and I had to sit down, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. Those things in the jars, they couldn't have been moving. It had to be the liquid, maybe some kind of circulation system to keep the specimens fresh. That was the only logical explanation. I spent the rest of the day trying to convince myself I'd imagined it all. I called my friend Jenny in Boston just to hear another human voice, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her what I'd found. She'd think I was having some kind of breakdown. That night, I barely slept. Every sound the housemaid seemed louder, more intentional. Around 3 in the morning, I thought I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room. Not the random creaking of old wood settling, but actual footsteps, slow and deliberate. I lay there frozen, listening as they passed by my door and continued down the hall. They stopped right outside the room where I'd found the laboratory. The next morning, I found a letter on the kitchen table. It was addressed to me in Grandma Rose's handwriting, but I was sure it hadn't been there the night before. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message that made my blood run cold. Sarah, my dear child, if you're reading this, then you've found the family room. Don't be afraid. Everything I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but you must believe me. Your great-great-grandmother Margaret started this in 1847, and every generation since has continued the tradition. We are not like other families. We do not truly die. Sarah, we become part of something greater. The letter went on to explain things that couldn't be true, how each generation of Whitmores had learned to preserve their ancestors, not just their memories, but their actual bodies, their consciousness, how they had developed techniques over the decades to keep human tissue alive indefinitely, to transfer awareness from one form to another. You may have noticed some ... changes in the family photographs. The letter continued. Each generation must choose which parts of their ancestors to carry forward. We add their knowledge to our own, their memories to ours. Margaret's eyes see through mine, James's hands work through mine. We are all here, Sarah, waiting for you to join us. I crumpled up the letter and threw it across the room. This was insane. Grandma Rose had clearly been sick, maybe dementia or something. There was no way any of this could be real. But that night, I started having the dreams. They were vivid, more real than any dreams I'd ever had. I was in the house, but it was different, younger, brighter. I was wearing clothes that weren't mine, speaking to people I didn't recognize but somehow knew. And in every dream, I looked different. Sometimes I had different colored eyes. Sometimes my hands were wrong, too big or with too many fingers. I woke up exhausted, my body aching like I'd been running for hours. And when I looked in the bathroom mirror, I saw something that made me stumble backward. My left eye, which had always been brown like my father's, was now green, bright green, like the color of the eyes in some of those old photographs. I called in sick to my next job. I couldn't leave the house, not yet. I needed to understand what was happening to me. That's when I found Grandma Rose's journals. They were hidden in a secret compartment behind her bedroom closet. 23 leather-bound books, dating back to 1920. I started with the most recent one and worked backward, and what I read made everything else seem normal by comparison. Grandma Rose hadn't been the sweet old lady I remembered. She'd been something else entirely, something that had lived much longer than 93 years. The journals documented decades of what she called integrations, surgical procedures, where she had added parts from other family members to her own body. Margaret's liver processes toxins more efficiently than a normal human liver. Read one entry from 1962. The integration was successful, and I can now consume substances that would kill an ordinary person. Her memories of the original preservation process are also clearer now. Another entry from 1978. James's additional finger has proven invaluable for delicate work. The neural pathways integrated smoothly, and I can now perform surgeries that would be impossible with a normal hand. The entries got more detailed as they went on, describing not just physical modifications but mental ones, how she could access memories from ancestors who had died decades before she was born, how their knowledge and skills became hers through what she called neural incorporation. And then I found the entries about me. Sarah shows promise. Read. An entry from my 10th birthday. Her eye structure is suitable for Margaret's enhancement. Will begin preparation when she reaches maturity. Modification progresses well. From 3 years ago. The preliminary genetic adjustments are taking hold. Sarah's body is ready for the inheritance, though she doesn't know it yet. I ran to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. The green eye was definitely there, and now I could see other changes too. My left hand looked different. The fingers were longer, more elegant. My jawline seemed sharper, more defined. These weren't just physical changes. I was starting to remember things that had never happened to me. Conversations from decades ago. The feeling of hands that weren't mine performing delicate surgery. Knowledge of human anatomy that I'd never learned. And I was hearing voices. They started as whispers, so quiet I thought it was just the house settling. But they got louder, clearer, multiple voices, all talking at once, all of them familiar somehow. They were coming from inside my own head. "Don't fight it, child," said a woman's voice that sounded like mine but older. "We've been waiting so long for you to join us." "The integration is beginning," said another voice, this one male and more distant. "Soon you'll understand why this is necessary." I grabbed Grandma Rose's journals and ran back to the laboratory. If this was really happening, if I was somehow being changed into something else, maybe I could figure out how to stop it. But there had to be a way to reverse whatever was being done to me. But when I got to the locked room, I found something new. On the metal table in the center was a wooden box I hadn't noticed before. Inside were surgical tools, but these were different from the others, more delicate, more precise. And there was a note, for Sarah's integration, use when the voices become clear. The voices in my head were getting louder now, more insistent. I could feel something else happening to my body, changes that went deeper than just physical appearance. My thoughts were becoming mixed up with memories that weren't mine. I was losing track of where I ended, and the other voices began. And then I saw movement in one of the glass containers, not just the liquid circulating, actual movement. One of the preserved hands was flexing its fingers, pressing against the glass like it was trying to get out. As I watched in horror, other containers started showing signs of activity. Organs pulsing, limbs twitching, things that should have been dead for decades showing signs of life. "We're ready now," the voices said in unison, ready to be whole again. The integration was beginning whether I wanted it or not. I wish I could tell you I fought it. I wish I could say I found some way to break free from whatever curse or madness had taken hold of my family. But the truth is, once the integration started, I didn't want to stop it. The voices weren't just voices anymore. They were people, my ancestors, all of them, with their own memories and personalities and knowledge. Margaret, who had started it all in 1847 when she discovered how to preserve human consciousness in living tissue. James, who had perfected the surgical techniques in the 1920s. Elizabeth, who had learned to transfer memories between generations in the 1950s. And Grandma Rose, who had been all of them and more, carrying forward nearly 2 centuries of accumulated knowledge and experience. When I finally understood what they were offering me, I stopped running from it. Immortality, yes, but more than that, the chance to be part of something larger than myself, to carry forward everything my family had learned and discovered, to never truly die, but to become part of an eternal legacy. The integration took 3 days. I won't describe the process in detail. Some things are too personal, too sacred to share with outsiders. But when it was over, I was no longer just Sarah Whitmore. I was all of them, every generation that had come before me, their memories and skills and knowledge now part of who I am. I can see through Margaret's eyes now, which is why my left eye changed color. I can use James's surgical skills, which is why my hands have become more dexterous. I carry Elizabeth's understanding of consciousness transfer and Rose's centuries of accumulated wisdom, and I am no longer alone in this house. My family is with me, as they always have been, waiting for the next generation to join us. That was 6 months ago. I've stopped taking freelance photography jobs. I have more important work to do now. The estate requires maintenance, and there are always new techniques to perfect, new knowledge to preserve. I've learned things about life and death that would revolutionize medicine if the world were ready for them. But the world isn't ready. It may never be ready. Sometimes people come to the house, hikers who've gotten lost, real estate agents who haven't gotten the message that the property is no longer for sale, distant relatives researching family history. I always welcome them warmly. I make them tea, show them around the house, tell them stories about our family's long and fascinating history. Most of them leave after a few hours. walking back down the long driveway to their cars with pleasant memories of meeting the last of the Whitmores. But some of them, some of them stay. The ones who show potential, who have the right genetic markers, who might be suitable for preservation. We're very selective. We only choose people who will contribute something valuable to our collective knowledge. A doctor who understands cardiac surgery, a biochemist who specializes in tissue preservation, a young woman with rare genetic traits that would be useful for future generations. They're happy here. Once the integration is complete, they understand that they're part of something greater now, something that will outlive any individual human lifespan. Their knowledge becomes our knowledge, their skills become our skills. They achieve a kind of immortality that most people can only dream of. The house has grown to accommodate our expanded family. Rooms that weren't there before appear when we need them. The basement extends deeper than it used to, with new laboratories and preservation facilities. The architecture itself seems to evolve to meet our needs, and we're always looking for new additions. People with unique talents, rare skills, genetic traits that would benefit the collective. We've learned to be patient over the generations. Good candidates don't come along often, but when they do, we make sure they feel welcome. If you're reading this, perhaps you're one of those candidates. Perhaps you have something to offer that would make you valuable to our family. We'd love to meet you, to learn about your background and abilities. The Whitmore estate is easy to find. Just follow the old county road north of Montpelier until you reach the iron gates. They're always open for visitors, and once you're here, well, we think you'll find it very difficult to leave. After all, family is forever, and the Whitmore family has been growing for nearly 2 centuries now. We have so much room for more. My name is Dr. Amanda Cross, and I wish I'd never heard of perfect silence. 3 months ago, I could hear a pin drop in a crowded room. Now, my left ear is completely dead. The accident at the university lab wasn't anyone's fault, just a stupid mistake with pressurized equipment that cost me half my hearing. The doctors said I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. That's how I ended up at Quietech Labs, buried 3 stories under the Nevada desert. When Dr. Martinez called about the research position, I almost said no. We need someone who understands sound, he'd said. Someone who knows what we're losing when we can't hear. The facility looked like something from a science fiction movie. Steel corridors lined with sound-dampening foam. Thick doors that sealed with a hiss. Everything designed to control noise, to study it, to eliminate it completely. "Welcome to the quietest place on earth," Martinez said as he walked me through the main lab. Banks of computers showed sound wave patterns, frequency analyzers, decibel, measurements that meant nothing to most people, but everything to me. I'd spent 10 years studying hearing loss, trying to help people who'd lost what I'd just lost myself. The irony wasn't lost on me. Our main project is the anechoic chamber, Martinez explained, leading me down a hallway that seemed to swallow sound. Perfect acoustic isolation. No echo, no reflection, no outside noise. Complete silence. He stopped at a massive door marked with warning signs. Through a small window, I could see a room lined with dark foam wedges pointing inward like teeth. Most people can't stay in there more than 45 minutes. The silence drives them crazy. I pressed my good ear to the glass. Nothing, not even the sound of my own breathing. "What's the longest anyone's stayed inside?" I asked. 2 hours. Graduate student from MIT. Came out babbling about hearing music that wasn't there. Martinez shrugged. Hallucinations. The brain creates sound when there isn't any. That should have been my first warning. My job was simple. Monitor test subjects in the chamber. Record their responses. Help understand how the human brain reacts to perfect quiet. Most of our subjects were volunteers from the local college, kids who needed extra money for beer and pizza. The work was routine at first. Students would go in, sit quietly, then come out reporting the usual things, hearing their heartbeat, their blood flowing, their joints creaking, normal stuff. The brain isn't designed for complete silence, but after 2 weeks, I started noticing patterns in the data that didn't make sense. Subject after subject reported hearing the same things, whispers in a language they couldn't identify, music without melody, voices calling their names, always in the last 15 minutes of their session, always from the same corner of the chamber. "Equipment malfunction," Martinez said when I showed him the reports. "The chamber isn't perfectly silent anymore. We'll run diagnostics." The diagnostics came back clean. Every microphone, every sensor, every piece of recording equipment showed the same thing. Perfect silence, negative decibels, sound waves that shouldn't exist. But the subjects kept hearing things. I started staying late, reviewing footage from the chamber's cameras, watching students sit in that room, seeing their faces change as they heard something our equipment couldn't detect. Their eyes would track movement that wasn't there. Their heads would turn toward sounds that our instruments swore didn't exist. On Thursday night, 3 weeks into the job, I decided to go in myself. "You sure about this?" Martinez asked as I suited up with the standard monitoring equipment. Heart rate monitor, brainwave sensors, emergency beacon. "Your hearing situation might make the experience more intense." I clipped the emergency beacon to my shirt. "That's exactly why I need to do this." The chamber door sealed behind me with a sound like a tomb closing. Then ... nothing. True silence is not the absence of sound. It's the presence of something else entirely. I sat in the center chair, surrounded by those foam wedges, and tried to relax. The silence pressed against my eardrums like water. My heartbeat seemed loud as thunder. Each breath sounded like wind through a canyon. 15 minutes in, my damaged ear started to tingle. 20 minutes, and I could swear I heard my own blood moving through my veins. At 30 minutes, the whispers started. Soft at first, like conversations in the next room. Words I couldn't make out in voices I didn't recognize. Coming from everywhere and nowhere. I checked my equipment, everything showed normal. Heart rate elevated but stable. Brainwaves active but not abnormal. The whispers weren't in the room. They were in my head, except they weren't. At 35 minutes, I heard my name, Amanda. Clear as day, spoken by a woman's voice I'd never heard before. I spun around in my chair, but the chamber was empty. The foam wedges stared back at me like 1,000 dark eyes. "Hello," I called out. My voice vanished into the foam, absorbed completely. No echo, no reflection. It was like speaking into a void. The voice came again, closer this time. "Amanda, can you hear us?" Us, plural. I reached for my emergency beacon, but my hand stopped halfway. This was what the students had been experiencing. This was the data I needed. "Who are you?" I whispered. The response came from directly behind my chair. "We are the sound between sounds. The noise and the quiet. We have been waiting so long for someone who could hear us properly." I turned around. Nothing there but foam and shadow. My damaged ear was getting hot, almost burning, like something was pushing through the scar tissue, trying to reach the nerve endings that no longer worked. "What do you want?" I asked. "To be heard, to be real, to exist in your world of noise and chaos." The voice was changing, becoming multiple voices, harmonizing with itself. "Your broken ear, Amanda. It makes you special. It makes you a bridge." The temperature in the chamber dropped 20 degrees in seconds. My breath started showing in small puffs of vapor. "The silence here is not empty," the voices continued. "It is full of us. We are the sounds that exist in the spaces between your sounds, the frequencies your world cannot produce." I stood up, backing toward the door. "Don't leave, Amanda. We have so much to tell you, so much to show you." My equipment started going crazy. Heart rate spiking, brainwaves showing patterns I'd never seen before. But the room's acoustic sensors still showed perfect silence. I hit the emergency beacon. The chamber door opened 30 seconds later. Martinez and 2 technicians rushed in, but by then the voices had stopped. The temperature was normal. Everything was normal, except for the blood trickling from my damaged ear. "What happened?" Martinez demanded as they checked my equipment. I wanted to tell him about the voices, about the cold, about the sensation of something trying to push through my damaged eardrum. But looking at their concerned faces, I realized how crazy it would sound. "Hallucination," I said finally. "Just like the students, the brain creates sound when there isn't any." But that night, lying in my hotel room 50 miles from the facility, I could still hear them whispering. I should have quit, should have packed my bags and driven back to California, found a nice safe job in a regular audiology clinic. But I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd heard in that chamber. The voices had known my name. They'd known about my hearing loss. They'd called me a bridge. I started coming in early, staying late, diving into the facility's history. Quiet labs had been built 15 years ago, But the land had an older history. Government acoustic experiments in the 1950s, military sound weapon research, projects with names like Silent Thunder and Echo Zero that ended abruptly with no explanation. All the records were classified, but I found references in old scientific journals, researchers who'd reported anomalous acoustic phenomena in perfect silence experiments. Projects shut down after team members suffered audio-related psychological breaks. The pattern was always the same. Perfect silence environments, researchers hearing impossible sounds, projects terminated, records sealed. Amanda, you're pushing too hard, Martinez warned me Friday afternoon. You've been in the chamber 4 times this week. That's not normal protocol. But I had to understand. Each session the voices became clearer, more real, more insistent. They told me about their world, a dimension of pure sound that existed parallel to ours. They said our universe was full of holes, gaps in the acoustic spectrum where their reality bled through. Perfect silence was the biggest hole of all. Your scientists don't understand, they whispered during my Thursday session. They think silence is the absence of sound, but silence is a presence. We are that presence. What do you want from our world? I asked. To exist fully, to be heard by everyone, not just the broken ones like you. Your damaged ear is a crack in the wall. Between worlds, through you, we can reach the others. That's when I started having doubts. Friday afternoon, a new test subject came in. Jenny Morrison, 19, psychology major, needed $50 for textbooks. Sweet kid with her whole life ahead of her. Just sit quietly, I told her as she entered the chamber. If you hear anything unusual, don't panic. It's just your brain adjusting to the silence. 20 minutes in, Jenny started screaming. We pulled her out immediately. She was pale, shaking, blood trickling from both ears. Her heart rate was dangerously high. They're in there, she gasped, grabbing my arm. The things in the quiet, they wanted to come home with me. They said they could make me here forever. Jenny was hospitalized that night with severe acoustic trauma. The doctors couldn't explain how someone could suffer hearing damage in a room with no sound. But I knew. Saturday morning, Martinez called an emergency meeting. We're shutting down chamber experiments indefinitely. He announced 3 hospitalizations this week. All students reporting identical auditory hallucinations. Corporate is worried about lawsuits. You can't shut it down, I said, surprising myself with my view. We're on the verge of a breakthrough. We're discovering something completely new about the nature of sound and silence. Martinez stared at me. Amanda, these aren't discoveries. These are medical emergencies. People are getting hurt. When I realized the voices weren't just talking to me anymore, they were talking through me. That night, I went to the facility alone, used my security card to get past the after-hours locks. The building felt different in the dark, alive somehow, like it was breathing. The chamber door was sealed, but I could hear them calling from inside. Dozens of voices now, maybe hundreds, all begging to be let out. We're ready, Amanda, they said as I entered. Your ear has healed enough. The bridge is complete. My damaged ear wasn't burning anymore. It felt cold, like something was moving through it, using the scar tissue as a pathway. What bridge? I asked, though part of me already knew. The bridge between silence and sound, between their world and ours. You're going to help us cross over. The temperature plummeted. Frost formed on the chamber walls. The acoustic foam started vibrating, producing sounds that shouldn't have been possible, frequencies that existed between the frequencies. Our world could produce. Stop, I said, but my voice came out wrong, layered, like multiple people speaking at once. The voices laughed, and the sound came from my own throat. Too late, Amanda. We're already here. I woke up on the chamber floor with Martinez shaking. Me, Jesus, Amanda, what were you thinking? Breaking in here alone. He helped me sit up. Security found you passed out. You've been missing for 6 hours. 6 hours. I remembered entering the chamber, remembered the cold, remembered the voices laughing through my mouth. But everything after that was blank. The chamber, I said, looking around. The foam wedges were different, rearranged, some pointing outward instead of inward. Something's wrong with the chamber. The chamber's fine. It's you I'm worried about. Martinez checked my pulse. Your heart rate's still elevated. And Amanda, you've been talking in your sleep. Multiple voices, languages I don't recognize. That's when I felt it. The silence in my damaged ear wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Something was living in the dead space where my hearing used to be. We need to evacuate the facility, I said, standing up too quickly. Everyone needs to leave, now. Amanda, you're having a breakdown. The stress of your hearing loss, the isolation work. I'm not having a breakdown. But even as I said it, I could hear them whispering in my damaged ear. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all speaking at once. She's beginning to understand. They said soon she'll help us reach the others. Martinez was still talking, but I couldn't focus on his words. The whispers were getting louder, clearer. They were showing me things, images of sound made visible, frequencies that could alter matter, acoustic waves that could rewrite reality itself. Your world is so noisy, they whispered, so chaotic. We can fix that. We can bring perfect harmony, perfect silence, perfect control. No, I said out loud. Martinez stopped talking. No, what? They want to replace all sound, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Not just exist alongside it, replace it. They want to turn our entire acoustic dimension into their kind of silence. Amanda, who is they? Before I could answer, the chamber's acoustic panels started moving, shifting, rearranging themselves, creating new patterns. The room was reconfiguring itself. It's not just a portal, I whispered. The whole chamber is becoming one of them. The temperature dropped again. Martinez's breath started showing vapor. The computers outside the chamber began registering impossible readings, sound waves that existed in negative space, frequencies that bent reality around them. We tried to tell you gently, the voices said, and now Martinez could hear them, too. His eyes went wide with terror. But humans never listened. You only understand force. The chamber door slammed shut, locked from the inside, even though there was no mechanism to do that. What do you want? Martinez shouted at the empty air. Silence, they replied, and suddenly all sound vanished from the room. Not just the absence of noise, the absence of the possibility of noise. We couldn't hear our heartbeats, our breathing, our voices. We moved our mouths, but no sound emerged. The silence was so complete it had physical weight, pressing against our bodies like water. Then, in that impossible quiet, they spoke directly into our minds. Your world makes too much noise. Talking, laughing, crying, screaming, music and traffic and machinery and voices. Always voices. We will fix this. We will bring peace. By killing everyone. I thought back at them. By perfecting everyone. Sound is chaos. Silence is order. We will teach your species the beauty of true quiet. That's when I understood. They weren't just trying to cross over into our world. They were trying to transform it, turn our entire acoustic reality into their version of perfect silence. And they needed me to do it. Your damaged ear is the key, they explained. It exists in both worlds now. Through you, we can reach every human ear on Earth. We can teach them all to hear the way you do. I felt something pushing through my scar tissue, trying to reach the acoustic nerve that no longer worked. But instead of restoring my hearing, it was trying to replace it with something else. No, I said, and this time I could speak again. I won't let you. You have no choice. The bridge is already built. The chamber walls began to pulse with a rhythm like a heartbeat. The foam wedges started singing in frequencies that made my bones ache. Reality was bending around us, becoming something that existed between sound and silence. Martinez, I said, grabbing his arm. The emergency shutdown. For the whole facility. Where is it? Control room. He gasped. But the system requires 2 keys. Where are the keys? My office and the director's safe. I looked at the chamber walls, now rippling like water. We had maybe minutes before this room became a permanent doorway between dimensions. Can you make it to your office? I think so. But do it. Get your key and meet me at the control room. I'll get the director's key. Amanda, how do you know about the shutdown system? I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I wasn't the only one with access to information anymore. The voices had been in my head for days, learning everything I knew, showing me everything they knew, including how to stop them. The chamber door opened. They wanted us to leave, to spread their influence beyond this room. That was their mistake. Run, I told Martinez. As we fled the chamber, I could hear them laughing in my damaged ear. They thought they'd won. They were wrong. The director's safe was in his office on the 2nd level. I knew the combination not because I'd been told, but because the voices had shown me. They'd been in the facility's systems for weeks, learning, preparing. My hands shook as I opened the safe. Inside, along with the emergency key, were files marked Project HO0, classified, the same project name I'd found in the old research papers. I grabbed the key and ran. Martinez was waiting in the control room, pale and shaking. "Amanda, what's happening to us?" "They've been using the chamber as a beachhead," I said, inserting my key into the emergency console. "Building strength, learning about our world, planning an invasion through acoustic space. That's impossible." "Two keys, turn together on 3, I said, ignoring his protest. "1, ... 2, ... wait," Martinez said. "The emergency shutdown destroys the entire facility. Everyone inside dies." "Everyone inside is already dead," I said. "We just don't know it yet." 3. We turned the keys together. Alarms started blaring throughout the facility. Red lights flashed. A computerized voice announced, "Emergency shutdown initiated. Facility lockdown in 60 seconds. The voices in my ear started screaming, "You cannot stop us. We exist in every moment of silence, every quiet pause between words. We are already in your world." "Not if there's no silence left to hide in," I said. "The emergency system was designed for acoustic containment breaches, situations where dangerous sound experiments might escape the facility. It worked by flooding every room with specific frequencies that would neutralize any acoustic anomaly, including supernatural ones." The building started vibrating as massive speakers hidden in the walls came online. Every room filled with precisely calculated noise frequencies that would eliminate any possibility of perfect silence. 30 seconds to lock down, the computer announced. "We need to get out of here," Martinez said, pulling me toward the exit. But I knew we wouldn't make it. The lockdown was too fast, and I was already too connected to them. The bridge they'd built through my damaged ear worked both ways. "Go," I told Martinez. "Get to the surface. Make sure this place stays buried. I'm not leaving you. Go." He ran. I stayed in the control room and listened to the voices screaming. As their perfect silence was destroyed by carefully orchestrated noise, they were being pulled back through the acoustic portal, their connection to our reality severed. But they were taking part of me with them. The frequencies flooding the facility were specifically designed to eliminate supernatural acoustic phenomena. That included whatever they'd built in my ear, the bridge between their world and ours. As the noise reached crescendo, I felt something tear in my head. The last bit of hearing in my damaged ear vanished completely, taking with it the voices, the whispers, the connection to their dimension of perfect silence. The emergency shutdown lasted exactly 5 minutes. When it ended, the facility was acoustically dead. Every piece of sound equipment destroyed, every recording wiped, every trace of the supernatural acoustic phenomena eliminated, and I was completely deaf. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my apartment in San Francisco, writing this down while I still remember everything clearly. The government classified the entire incident. Quietech Labs was permanently sealed and turned into a storage facility for hazardous materials. Martinez visits sometimes. He never talks about what happened in the chamber, but I can see it in his eyes. He heard them too, in those final moments. He knows what we stopped. My hearing loss is permanent now, complete, but I've learned to see it as a gift rather than a disability. I can't hear the whispers between sounds anymore. Can't be reached by voices from other dimensions. I work with deaf children now, teaching them that silence isn't empty, it's just a different kind of fullness. They understand in ways that hearing people never could. Sometimes, late at night, I feel vibrations in the floor, cars passing, music from neighboring apartments, the subway running beneath the building, all the sounds of a living city. I put my hand on the wall and feel the life in those vibrations, the conversations, the laughter, the crying, the music, all the beautiful noise of humanity that they wanted to silence forever. And I smile, because I know they can't reach us anymore. The bridge is burned, but sometimes, just sometimes, when the city gets very quiet in the early morning hours, I wonder if perfect silence still exists somewhere, if they're still waiting in the spaces between sounds, looking for another way through. That's why I monitor every acoustic research project in the world now, through visual alerts, email notifications, seismic readings. I can't hear them coming anymore, but I can watch for the signs, because someone has to stand guard against the silence. Someone has to make sure the world keeps making noise. My name is Jake Morrison, and I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw the corn. I'd been gone from Nebraska for 10 years, building a life in Chicago as an agricultural engineer. Clean office, steady paycheck, air conditioning. That actually worked. When Dad died last spring, I figured I'd sell the farm and get back to my real life. 500 acres of corn wasn't exactly my retirement plan. But standing at the edge of our property that September morning, I felt something. I hadn't expected. The corn stretched out like a green ocean, taller than I remembered, swaying in patterns that didn't match the wind. Dad had always been good with crops, but this was different. This was perfect, too perfect. I walked the rows that first day, checking the soil, measuring stalk heights, doing what engineers do. Everything looked normal on paper. pH levels good, moisture content ideal, growth rates within expected parameters. But the corn felt wrong somehow. It rustled when there was no breeze. It seemed to watch me walk by. "You're losing it, Jake," I told myself. "City boy comes home, thinks the corn's got eyes." That evening, I sat on the porch with a beer and Dad's old journals. He'd kept detailed records going back 30 years, planting schedules, weather patterns, yield projections, normal farmer stuff. But as I flipped through the pages, I noticed something odd. Every September, Dad had drawn a map, the same map, year after year. A maze, the corn maze. I'd forgotten about it completely. When I was a kid, Dad would cut paths through a section of the cornfield every fall. Families would come from 3 counties over to get lost in our maze during harvest season. It was good money, especially when times were tight. But looking at Dad's maps now, I realized the maze was huge, way bigger than I remembered. The paths, twisted and turned in impossible ways, creating loops that shouldn't work, dead ends that led nowhere, and a center that seemed to shift position from year to year. I grabbed a flashlight and walked out to the maze section. Dad had already cut the paths before he died. They were perfect, carved with surgical precision through the corn. I followed the main entrance, expecting to get my bearings and maybe walk the whole thing. 20 minutes later, I was completely lost. That's when I heard the children laughing. High, sweet voices echoing from somewhere deep in the maze. But we lived 60 miles from the nearest town. No kids should be out here, especially not after dark. I called out, asking if anyone needed help, but the laughter just moved farther away. I followed the sound for another hour, taking turn after turn, but I never found the children. Worse, I couldn't find my way out. The paths all looked the same in the flashlight beam. Tall corn walls pressing in on both sides, rustling leaves that sounded almost like whispers. When I finally stumbled out of the maze, I was exhausted and confused. According to my watch, I'd been in there for 3 hours, but that was impossible. The maze couldn't be that big. I went back the next morning with a GPS and measuring tape. The maze was exactly what Dad's map showed, a quarter-mile square with a simple spiral design. I walked the whole thing in 15 minutes, but I knew what I'd experienced the night before. Somehow, the maze was bigger in the dark. The Harvest Festival was Dad's biggest event of the year. Families would drive hours to visit our maze, buy pumpkins, and drink hot cider. I'd already advertised in 4 counties, promising the Morrison family corn maze experience. The money would help pay for Dad's medical bills and maybe fix the barn roof. What I didn't expect was how many people would show up. Cars started, arriving early Saturday morning, minivans full of kids, couples on dates, teenagers looking for a thrill. By noon, I had over 100 people wandering around the farm. The maze had a steady stream of visitors, and everyone seemed to be having fun. That's when the Hendricks family went missing. Tom and Sarah Hendricks had driven down from Omaha with their 2 kids, Emma and Sam, 8 and 10 years old, both blonde and excited about getting lost in the corn. I watched them enter the maze around 2 in the afternoon, joking about who would find the center first. They never came out. At first, I wasn't worried. People took their time in the maze. Some families spent hours in there, making it a whole adventure. But when the sun started setting and I still hadn't seen the Hendricks family, I got nervous. I called into the maze, using the megaphone I kept for emergencies. No response. I walked the perimeter, checking for holes in the corn where they might have gotten out. Nothing. Finally, I grabbed my flashlight and went in after them. The maze felt different than it had the night before. The paths seemed narrower, the corn walls higher, and there were sounds coming from deep inside. Not laughter this time, but voices. Adult voices, calling for help. Emma, Sam, where are you? It was Tom Hendricks, somewhere in the maze. His voice echoed strangely, like he was calling from the bottom of a well. I followed the sound, but every time I thought I was getting closer, it moved farther away. Then I heard Sarah screaming. It was a sound I'll never forget. Pure terror, the kind of scream that comes from seeing something that shouldn't exist. It came from the center of the maze, where Dad's map showed a small clearing. I ran toward the sound, taking turns without thinking, following my instincts. The corn seemed to part in front of me, creating paths that hadn't been there moments before. And then I was in the center, in a circular clearing about 20 feet across. It was empty. No Hendricks family. No sign they'd ever been there. Just trampled corn stalks and a smell I couldn't identify. Sweet and rotten at the same time, like fruit left too long in the sun. I searched until dawn, bringing in the sheriff and a search team. We walked every inch of that maze, used dogs to track scents, even brought in a helicopter. The Hendricks family had vanished completely. Their car was still in my parking area, keys in the ignition. Their cell phones were in the car too, showing dozens of missed calls from worried relatives. But Tom, Sarah, Emma, and Sam were gone. The sheriff said they must have wandered off the property, maybe gotten lost in the fields, but I knew better. They'd gone into the maze, and the maze had kept them. That night, I found Dad's real journal. It was hidden in his bedroom, tucked behind a loose board in the wall. This one was different from the farming records I'd been reading. This one was full of dates, names, and detailed drawings of the maze layout. And every entry ended the same way. The harvest requires sacrifice. Going back 30 years, Dad had recorded every family that had gone missing in our maze. The Hendricks weren't the first. They were just the latest in a long line of disappearances that happened every September during harvest season. And according to Dad's notes, the maze was hungry for more. I should have shut down the festival right then. Should have bulldozed the entire maze and planted soybeans next spring. But I didn't understand what I was dealing with yet, and canceling would have meant financial ruin. So I kept the maze open, telling myself the Hendricks had just wandered off. Maybe they'd hitchhiked home, forgotten their car. People did strange things sometimes. The second family disappeared on Sunday morning. The Garcia's parents and 3 kids from Grand Island. They entered the maze at 10 a.m. sharp, laughing and taking selfies. At 2 p.m., when the maze should have closed, they still hadn't come out. This time I called the sheriff immediately. We searched with twice as many people, used thermal imaging equipment, even brought in a helicopter with infrared cameras. But just like the Hendricks, the Garcia family had vanished without a trace. The only thing we found was their youngest daughter's backpack, sitting in the exact center of the maze. It was covered in morning dew, like it had been there all night. But that was impossible. We'd searched the center clearing a dozen times, looking for the Hendricks. Inside the backpack was a drawing, a crayon picture of tall corn stalks and stick figures with big smiles. At the bottom, in a child's handwriting, "The corn people are nice. They want us to stay and play forever." That night, I called my uncle, Frank in Iowa. He'd grown up on our farm with Dad, might know something about the family history. "Jake," he said, when I described what was happening, "you need to get out of there. Tonight." "What are you talking about? Your dad never told you about the real harvest, did he? About what the maze actually does?" Frank explained that our land had been special for over a century. Native Americans had considered it sacred, a place where the spirit world touched the earth. When the first European settlers arrived, they'd made a deal with those spirits, good harvests in exchange for occasional sacrifices. "Your great-great-grandfather started the tradition," Frank said. "Every generation of Morrisons has been the keeper of the maze. It's not just corn, Jake, it's a trap. And if you don't feed it, it'll spread beyond your property. It'll keep growing until it consumes everything." I laughed. I had to. It sounded like something out of a horror movie. But then I looked out my window at the maze, and I saw lights moving in the corn. Not flashlights, something else. Something that glowed green and pulsed like a heartbeat. "How do I stop it?" I asked. Frank was quiet for a long time. "You don't," he finally said. "You either feed it, or you join it. Those are the only choices." I hung up and walked outside. The maze was definitely bigger than it had been that morning. The paths extended farther into the cornfield, creating new routes that hadn't existed before, and from deep inside, I could hear voices, children's voices, calling my name. "Jake, Jake." Come play with us." It was Emma Hendricks. I recognized her voice from when she'd been running around the farm, excited about the maze. But Emma was gone. She'd been missing for 2 days. "We're having so much fun, Jake. The corn people taught us games." I walked to the maze entrance, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The opening was wider than before, and the path curved in directions that didn't match Dad's map. It was like the maze was redesigning itself, growing and changing every night. "Jake," more voices now. Tom and Sarah Hendricks, the Garcia family, maybe others, all calling from somewhere inside the maze, somewhere that shouldn't exist. "Come find us. We're all here." I stepped into the maze, and the corn walls closed behind me with a sound like breaking bones. The paths were different now, wider in some places, narrower in others. The corn stalks had grown taller, creating a canopy that blocked out the stars. My flashlight beam barely penetrated the darkness, and every direction looked the same, but I could hear them clearly now. The missing families, calling to me from the heart of the maze. Their voices were wrong somehow, too cheerful, like they were reading from a script. And underneath their words, I heard something else, a rustling sound, like dozens of people moving through the corn. I followed the voices deeper into the maze, taking turns that led me further from the entrance. The air grew thick and sweet, with that same rotten fruit smell I'd noticed before. And then I saw them. The Hendricks family was standing in a small clearing, exactly where Dad's journal said they'd be. But they weren't quite right. Their skin had a greenish tint, and their eyes reflected my flashlight like a cat's. When they smiled, I saw their teeth had grown into points. "Jake," Emma ran toward me, her arms outstretched. "You found us. Now you can stay too." Behind her, the corn stalks began to move, not swaying in the wind, but actually walking, pulling, their roots from the ground and shambling forward like scarecrows come to life. And caught in their embrace were more people. The Garcia family, and others I didn't recognize, all of them smiling, those same pointed smiles. I ran. I didn't stop, running until I reached my house. But when I turned around, the maze was right behind me. It had grown across the entire farm in the space of a few hours, surrounding the house with walls of corn 30 feet high. I was trapped in my own property. The phone lines were dead. My cell phone showed no signal. Even my truck wouldn't start. The engine just clicked when I turned the key. The maze wanted me to stay, and it was making sure I had no choice. That's when I really started reading Dad's journal. The truth was worse than Uncle Frank had told me. Our family hadn't made a deal with spirits. We'd corrupted them. The original agricultural blessing had been twisted into something hungry and evil. Every September, the maze demanded sacrifices to keep the corn growing and the harvest rich, and every generation of Morrisons had been happy to provide them. Dad had been feeding families to the maze for 30 years. The missing persons reports, the search parties, the newspaper articles about tragic accidents, all of it was planned. Dad would advertise the maze, attract families from far away, and then let the corn take them. But there was more. According to Dad's notes, the maze wasn't just killing people. It was changing them, transforming them into something new, something that could live in the corn forever, tending the harvest and bringing in new victims. I was supposed to take over the family business. The maze was waiting for me to accept my role as the new keeper, to start bringing it fresh meat. And if I refused, it would spread beyond our property, consuming neighboring farms and eventually entire towns. I had to make a choice, become a monster like Dad, or let the maze destroy everything. That's when I heard the knock at my door. "Jake, are you in there?" It was Sheriff Martinez, but his voice sounded wrong. Too friendly, too eager. I looked out the window and saw him standing on my porch, still in uniform, but his eyes glowed green in the darkness. "The maze sent me to talk to you, Jake. It wants to make a deal." I didn't answer, but he kept talking anyway. "You don't have to feed it families, Jake. That was just your father's way. The maze is flexible. It just needs life energy to keep growing. A few hikers every year, some vagrant who won't be missed. Very clean, very simple." Behind him, I could see the missing families standing in my yard. The Hendricks, the Garcias, and dozens of others stretching back decades. All of them smiling those pointed smiles. All of them waiting for my answer. "Your father was getting old, Jake. He wasn't bringing in enough fresh meat. But you're young, smart, connected to the modern world. You could attract so many more visitors. Families with children are the maze's favorite, but it's not picky." I backed away from the window. but there was nowhere to go. The corn walls pressed against the house on all sides, and I could hear rustling as more of the corn people gathered outside. What happens if I say no? I called out. Sheriff Martinez laughed, but it wasn't his laugh. It was the sound corn makes when the wind blows through it. Oh, Jake, you're not going to say no, because if you do, we'll spread beyond your little farm. We'll take the whole county, then the whole state. Every cornfield in Nebraska will become part of the maize, and then Iowa, and Kansas, and everywhere else corn grows. He was right. I'd seen how fast the maize could grow when it wanted to. In a few weeks, it could cover thousands of square miles. Millions of people would be trapped in an endless corn maze, transformed into harvest servants. But if you cooperate, Martinez continued, we'll stay contained. Just your little farm, just a few victims every year. Much better for everyone. I thought about the families I'd already lost. Emma Hendricks, so excited about getting lost in the corn. The Garcia children, drawing pictures of their new friends. How many more would have to die to keep this thing satisfied? But I also thought about the alternative. An entire state consumed by living corn. Everyone I'd ever known transformed into green-eyed monsters serving an ancient hunger. I opened the door. All right, I said. I'll do it. Sheriff Martinez smiled, showing teeth like corn kernels. I knew you'd see reason, Jake. Welcome to the family business. That was 3 years ago. I'm writing this down because I think someone should know the truth, even if no one will ever believe it. The Morrison family farm is still here, still growing the best corn in Nebraska. We get visitors every fall for the Harvest Festival, and our maize is famous throughout the Midwest. Most people find their way out just fine. They have a good time, buy some pumpkins, tell their friends about the authentic farm experience, but a few don't make it out. A few get chosen by the maize to join our permanent family. I tell myself it's not my fault. The maize picks its own victims, usually people who won't be missed much. Drifters, troubled teens, families with no clothes, relatives, and it's not really death, not exactly. They're still alive in the corn, happy in their own way. I see them sometimes, working in the fields, tending the harvest that feeds us all. The sheriff thinks they're just missing persons, people who wandered off and got lost in the Nebraska wilderness. The FBI looked into it once, but the maize made sure they didn't find anything. It's good at hiding evidence. I've gotten good at my job too. I know how to spot the right families, the ones the maize wants most. Children are preferred, but adults work fine too. I just have to make sure they enter the maize at the right time, when the corn is hungriest. The worst part is how normal it feels now. I go to town, buy groceries, chat with neighbors about the weather and crop prices. I've even started dating again. There's a teacher in town who seems nice, but I can never tell anyone what really happens on the farm. Sometimes I think about running away, starting over somewhere without corn, but I know the maize would follow me. It's in my blood now, part of the Morrison family legacy. And besides, where would I go? Corn grows everywhere these days. The Harvest Festival is next week. I've already got the advertisements out, promising the best corn maze experience in the Midwest. Families are calling to book visits, excited to bring their children out to the farm. I hope they have a good time. Most of them will, but not all. The maize is getting hungry again, and it's been too long since the last harvest. 3 months since the Jenkins family from Kansas got lost in the corn. The maize has been patient, but patience has limits. Tonight, I'll walk the paths and check the corn. Make sure everything is ready for next weekend. The stalks are tall and strong, rustling with anticipation, and deep in the center of the maize, I can hear them singing. The children of the corn, welcoming new friends to stay and play forever. My name is Jake Morrison, and I should have burned this place down when I had the chance, but now it's too late. The harvest must go on.